Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. You might want to get your paper and pencil or paper and pens ready today. I'll be discussing tips from my unpublished, unfinished, not-for-sale book, things that I think you ought to think about having around, having at the ready. The list is long, and it's over 200 items, and I'll try to give you a complete set of reasons why you should consider these things and how to use them and so forth. Who, what, when, where, why, and how, where possible. And I'm going to try to be somewhat brief. If you have a suggestion for making improvements on what I mentioned today, please feel free to call. And, please be concise. I know you won't do what other broadcasts allow, and that is callers call and then they try to figure out what they're going to say after they're on the air. I know you wouldn't do that, so it goes without saying. The number to call is 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. There's just three of us in the studio today, just me and a couple of colts. And I want to thank Linda, who previously mentioned in some emails some tips for the care and feeding of the colts. The only thing is the colts that she was referring to are different from the colts that I have in the studio. The ones that she was talking about have 4 legs. The ones that I have in the studio have no legs, and they're made out of metal. I want to thank Jason for being our engineer today, as almost always. It's great to have Jason engineering the broadcast. He'll be answering the phone if you decide to call. And I've got an interesting piece of information before we get into the meat of today's class, and that is, you know that Joey in Michigan was banned from Walmart. You know that, right? We had a little contest, like one of your instructors was banned from ever going back to this particular Walmart. Who would it be? Who could it be? Well, Robert in Kansas figured it out, and it was Joey. And, we had some votes. I got some, and other instructors got some, but it was Joey. Well, this time, it's a little bit different. And it doesn't have anything to do with Walmart. It has to do with one of your instructors being told that he is no longer, or she is no longer welcome on the radio. Now, the question is, who do you think that might be? Which one of your instructors could that possibly be? And we'll probably tell you on next week. But if you have any thoughts, you can send, if you want to send me a note, you can send it to instructor@usaprepares.com, or you can give us a call at 866-582-9933. But really happened. I find it quite amusing that happened. Now, I've been fired the most. I mean, I don't think there's ever been a broadcaster who's been fired more times from the radio than I. And actually, even on one network, I've been fired 4 times. Can you imagine that? I'm a slow learner, so I was able to be fired 4 times. It can't happen anymore on that particular network, but interesting that one of your instructors was fired. Okay, so here's some things to think about. Now, what would happen if you had some friends show up? Now, in the good old days, we used to have people show up at the farm. I'd get a call here at the farm, and hey, I'm on my way. And so where are you? And the person would tell me where he or she is, mostly he's, and they would just tell me they're coming. Well, that doesn't happen anymore, right? Well, when they showed up, what would happen? Well, did they bring the things that they needed? Well, some of them, right? Some of the things that they needed they brought with them. Other things they didn't. So what did they bring with them? Well, obviously a suitcase. Did they bring towels? No. But did they bring clothes? Yeah. Did they bring food? No. Not generally, no. But they did bring a suitcase. So what would they do with that suitcase? Well, they put it in the spare bedroom, right? That's what they would do. Now, where would they put it first? First place they would put it is on the floor. And then when they unpacked later in the privacy of that room, they would take that suitcase and put it where? On the bed. So the suitcase would go from the floor to the bed. But before that, it'd be in the trunk of the car. But before that, where was it? Well, was it at the airport? Was it on the bus? Was it in a taxi? Was it in the back of the trunk of a taxi? Was it on the floor of a taxi where people put their feet, where they walk around the city streets? Was it in the men's room or the ladies' room of the airport? Yeah, probably. And now where is it? It's on your bed. So just think about that. That was in the good old days when we used to do stupid things like that. But now we're concerned about the corona panic and the coronavirus and other maladies and diseases. And it's unacceptable now, right? So I just wanted to share with you that you may not want to have people come visit you because they may take for granted that they can bring their suitcase, which has been who knows where, with them. And it's going to end up on your bed. Now, some people have bedspreads. And some of those bedspreads are difficult to wash. Some have to be dry cleaned. And would you consider even having a bedspread dry cleaned anymore? Or would you just say, listen, do not put that suitcase on the bed. And by the way, we're going to disinfect it before it comes in the house. Would you be so bold as to do that? I think I would. But then again, our gate's locked and we're not having visitors. Okay, so I just wanted to share that thought with you because that's the truth. That's how it works. All right, so years ago, I talked about, lighting fires and fires are an important thing. If you get stranded and you want to keep the animals away. I mean, if you've watched Westerns, they always start a fire, at night to keep the animals away, the predators. And for heat, warmth, maybe some cooking. I mean, fire's, kind of an important thing. Well, the Boy Scouts, there was one Boy Scout leader, and he had the boys sitting around, and they were going to start this fire. And he said, okay, so boys, how can we start this fire? And, one of them said, well, we can strike a rock with a steel object and, make some sparks and try to get some tinder lit. We can use a bow with a string and a stick, and we can generate some heat that way, and maybe we can start a fire. And I went through all these different ways, and he said, I'll tell you what, why don't we just use these matches? And that's the answer. Okay. So matches are the best way I can think of to start a fire. Now you can get the Bic lighters or the equivalent, or you can get the Ronson lighters with the lighter fluid, but the lighter fluid volatilizes, it evaporates, and eventually it goes away. And the Bic lighters have butane in them, and it's stored under pressure, and they can leak. And they rely on the flint. So what is the best way of having long-term storage for starting a fire? Well, that would be matches. So where do you store them? Well, I store them in a glass jar. Now, think of it like this. Remember when peanut butter used to come in glass jars, and it had a lid that kind of had a rubberized seal integral with the lid? Remember that? Well, I still have that peanut butter jar with the matches in it. from 50 years ago, 50 years ago. And they still work. Why? Well, because we've prevented, by having them in that jar with a seal, we've prevented the air exchange, the oxygen from going in and out, and destroying the matches. It keeps the moisture out. It works really great, but you got to put the lid back on after you take the pack of matches out. So, if you've noticed, matches are getting harder to find, right? They really are. It used to be that if you bought a pack of cigarettes, which I haven't done, you would get a free pack of matches. And if you went to a supermarket back in the 1960s, the cashier at the conveyor belt at the register would have, a box of matches, and if you bought a pack of cigarettes, you'd get a pack of matches or two. So matches were considered almost free, and they cost virtually nothing. Well, you can still get boxes of book matches. So boxes of 50 book matches in a package, the kind the stores used to give out for free. And you can check with your supermarkets. You can call them. I wouldn't drive there. I'd call them up and say, y'all sell those book matches? Can I buy a couple boxes? That's what I would do. And then I would take them out of the package and put them in a jar with a lid that seals. And glass is probably the best way to go. So that's one of the items. And by the way, there are a couple hundred items on this list. And I wanted to tell you, in some detail, why you should consider these items. By the way, Amazon sells these, but they're expensive. All right, next item on the list is a propane torch. Now, you've seen these things. They have these, typically they're a blue cylinder. They're about 14 inches tall. They have a brass head on them. Now, you can use them for thawing out frozen pipes, loosening rusted and seized nuts and bolts. Yeah. So the way we loosen rusted nuts and bolts, and you have to be careful. You certainly don't want to start a fire with it. You want to make sure that you're not using it in an area where there's chemicals that have volatilized and can cause an explosion. So we do this kind of thing outside. So let's say we have a piece of equipment that has a rusted nut or a rusted bolt, and it's not next to something that's combustible or flammable. So it's not adjacent to something that's plastic. Let's say it's metal. This bolt is holding metal together. What we do is we use a small flame with one of these propane torches, and we heat up the nut. Okay? We want the nut to expand, but we don't want the bolt to expand. We want the nut to get bigger without the bolt getting bigger. So it's a little tricky, but you can do it. I'm sure you've got the mental concept of what I'm saying. And then what we do is we have PB blaster, PB blaster, and it is a compound. It's a liquid that comes out of a spray can with a little nozzle and a red tube that comes out of it, so you can direct just a precise drop if you want in the right area. So we heat up the nut. We put a drop of PB blaster, which has lubricant, Teflon, etc., and it gets wicked right into between the threads of the nut and bolt. And then you can loosen it. Okay, we'll be right back. We're going into a break. Dan in Texas is on the line. He wants to talk about solar panels. Yeah, and just one more thing about the matches. Class, if you think you're going to need them, you ought to get them while you still can, okay, because they are getting harder to get. Dan in Texas, welcome. You're on with me.
Hi, good morning.
Hey.
Hey, I think it was last Friday you had mentioned about solar panels, and you had Stan Deo, I think, on the program within this last year, and I bought an EMP shield from him. His show, he was talking about solar panels, and within a week, I was like, oh, maybe God's telling me a good time to at least investigate on solar panels. And I wanted to find out about what your thoughts on solar panels with my existing power company or one in the neighborhood. And then if the guacamole hits the fan, how to switch it to where I get to use my own solar panels and not give back any energy.
Okay. So there are... this is going to take this whole segment, which goes to the bottom of the hour and longer. Do you have that much time?
Sure.
Okay. All right, because I want to give you a complete answer. So there are typically three kinds of systems. There's an off-grid system, which means that you have everything you need to generate your own electricity from the sun, for example, and you're completely independent of the grid. Then there's an on-grid system, which means that your solar power generation system requires the grid in order to operate. And then there's the third kind, which is the hybrid, which you can be on-grid or off-grid or both. Okay? And I'll explain what the differences are. We have the on-grid and off-grid both system. So, for example, if we want to use electricity, we can, from the grid, we can get it from the grid. If we want to generate our own electricity, we can do that. If we want to do both at the same time, meaning if we, like right now it's cloudy, and we probably, if we didn't have a battery bank, we'd be using more electricity than the sun would provide right now. So that's where the hybrid, on-grid, off-grid, both type system comes in. If you have a system, and what's happening throughout the United States, there are salespeople who are selling these wonderful solar systems, so they say. And it requires the grid in order to operate. And the reason for that is there needs to be a clock by which all these systems are synchronized. And that clock is the 60-cycle frequency of the grid. So what happens is you have a solar array, that would be the solar panels plus the frame to hold it in the right position, plus you'd have the wiring that would take that electricity, that direct current from the solar cells to what's called an inverter, and it would invert from, let's say, 12 volts, 24 volts, 48 volts, 96 volts, DC, direct current, to the inverter, which would invert it to 240 volts, alternating current. But it requires the clock, the synchronization clock of the grid in order not to melt down your system. So if the grid were to go down, you've got nothing because you lose the reference of the grid's 60-cycle clock. Some people might call it 60 hertz, but I'm older, so I would call it 60 cycles per second because that makes more sense to me. All right, so if the sun is shining and if the grid is up, you can generate electricity. And the way that system works is you put your electricity on the grid and you pull your electricity from the grid. So if you are using more than you are sending to the grid, you're going to pay for it. You'll pay extra for what you use. If you're using less electricity than you are providing from your solar array, the grid will pay you. Okay. Now, in our case, I have figured out how to do everything off grid except for one thing. Air conditioning. I can't figure that out because it takes so much current to run an air conditioning compressor, at least for our house it does, that I can't provide that much current. Now, I could run a window unit, a window air conditioning unit. I could do that. And I bought one. And I bought the boards so that if the grid goes down and I decide that I still want to have some air conditioning, I've got like a 6,000 BTU window air conditioner that I'm just going to stick in a doorway, frame it out, and dehumidify and barely cool the house. So those are some of the things to think about. Now, frame your questions. Just me today and a couple of cults. Dan's with us from Texas, and he had some questions about solar systems, and I've been describing the three major types. And that if you decide that you want to follow the recommendations of your utility company, they would encourage you to not have a battery bank. If you do not have a battery bank, you are not independent of the grid. If you do not have a battery bank, you are dependent on the grid. Okay? So what you're really doing is providing real estate on your property. Maybe it's on your roof, maybe it's in your yard, for this solar array to put electricity back on the grid. And they like that because they're going to pay you peanuts for it. Literally, they'll pay me 2.1 cents per kilowatt hour and sell it back to me for about 10 or 11 cents per kilowatt hour. Okay, what a racket, right? But you won't be independent unless you have a battery bank. Dan, your questions.
Yeah, so in regards to setting up solar panels, the hybrid for me sounds like the best way to go since I'm here where there's a lot of houses. And I think if I was maybe in an off-grid property in Montana or Missouri or somewhere, maybe I would just go solo, so to speak. So as a hybrid, living here in Texas and with this hurricane that just missed us, if we were without power, I would think, I could click a switch and use solar as much as I could, maybe just not AC. So what is your thoughts on, I know Stan Deo had mentioned something about having solar panels, but you can have it where it just works on your own. How would that go?
When you say works on your own, you mean off-grid or do you mean hybrid?
Yeah, I guess off-grid is what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, in our case, I'll tell you, the class is probably wondering what kind of a system we have. I zeroed in on Schneider Electric, spelled with an S. And Schneider Electric is a very large utility provider of equipment. So they provide the utility companies with sophisticated gear. And they also bought a company, I believe, called Xantrex. And I love Xantrex, Xantrex. They make battery chargers, but they've been acquired. And Schneider acquired them. So I really wanted to buy a Xantrex, but it's now Schneider. And it's top-of-the-line equipment. And here's the thing. You can buy Chinese equipment without any support, without any real warranty, or you can buy something that is backed and with technical support. And that's what I did. Now, there's other companies besides Schneider Electric, but we have an XW Plus 6848, and you can look it up. And that is the inverter model number of Schneider Electric, and it's hybrid. So I can literally, at the push of a button or the flip of switches, depending on how I want to do it, I can make it on-grid or off-grid or hybrid. Okay, I can tell it what to do. So if I think that times are still a little bit okay, I'm going to use the electricity from the grid. I'm going to send our electricity from the solar panels to the grid, and I'll pull it back from the grid as I need it, and I'll conserve or extend the life of our battery bank by doing that. And that's why I'm willing to do it. I'm no longer interested in, helping the utility company because they showed me who they are. They are not there for you. They say they are, but they're not. So you're on your own. So the hybrid system is the best way to go while we still have some of the remnant of the good old days left. So, but you're going to need a battery bank. Now here's the important consideration. Roughly 50% of the cost of the entire system is going to be the battery bank. And it's a killer. I mean, you look at the electronics and you go, boy, that's the heart of the whole thing. Why are the batteries so expensive? Well, they are. Now, there are two types of batteries that I would consider and one I would not consider. The one I would not consider is the one that's lately being touted as the best. And that would be the lithium ion type battery. And the reason that would be the kind that's in these electric cars or electric vehicles. Now, the reason I would not consider that is because it requires a very sophisticated charging system that is computer controlled. And if we have an EMP, the likelihood of that charging system cooking itself to death is way higher than if you don't have that type of a charging system. So our charging system is simple, and our battery bank is simple. That leaves only two types of batteries that I would consider. Rich Eben has one, and we have the other. Rich Eben has a lead-acid battery system. Lead-acid is the kind of battery that you have in your car or pickup truck, and they work really well for about 7 years. Some people manage to finesse them and not load them down and not discharge them too much, and they'll last a little bit longer. But they are really susceptible from being discharged more than 15%. So, for example, a lead-acid battery, if we'll say it holds 100 units of electricity, if you discharge it, overnight while you're running your lights and your equipment and your computer and your television, whatever it happens to be, your heating system, whatever, if you discharge that lead-acid battery bank more than 15%, that means bring it from 100 down to 85 units, we'll call it. Below 85 units of charge damages that battery bank permanently. And you're never going to be able to fix that damage that you've done. Now, it doesn't completely damage it. It's just like getting hit with a baseball bat. You still survive, but, the more times you get hit with a baseball bat, the tougher it's going to be to survive. All right? So the depth, it's called depth of discharge. So lead acid batteries will last longer if you only take them down to 85% and no more. There's another kind of battery that we have, which is called a nickel iron battery. The nickel iron battery was developed around 1906 by Thomas Alva Edison and Company. And it has a different technology. Instead of using acid as an electrolyte, it uses a base. And it's caustic, just as an acid is. But no one knows how long these will last, because batteries from 1906 are still working. And all you do with them is you dump out the electrolyte, flush it out with distilled water, and re-add new electrolyte. And they're like 99% as good as new. So nobody knows how long they're going to last. So my concern is, of those nickel iron batteries that we have, is I keep the cases out of the sunlight, because I don't want the cases to crack, because I know what's inside is going to last, generations, but I don't know how long the case is going to last. So I keep it out of the sunlight. Now, the nickel iron is more expensive. It's probably the most expensive solution in the short run. It is the least expensive solution in the long run. So, how much did our battery bank cost? I'll tell you. We imported it directly from China. And one of our instructors, Bruce Kay, lives in Ohio. He and I talked about it. I've never met Bruce, except being on the air with him and on the phone. And he and I decided to split a order of 80 batteries, or 80 cells. And each one of these cells weighs 100 pounds. They're huge, and they're very heavy. And so we placed this order, we split it, and it cost us about $20,000 for the whole thing. And so our half was about $10,000. So the battery bank of our system is $10,000. Now that's just, they just show up, okay? Then you have to connect them and install them and, those kinds of things. So we did all of that ourselves. We built our own battery rack. We didn't buy the prefabricated rack. We made it out of industrial shelving. We built our array out of industrial shelving. It looks, no one would know that it was homemade, but it is. But it is, there's nothing like it on the internet. And, I'd love to put an example. I'd love to show you on the website, which I took down, but, the trolls are such miserable people that I won't do it. But, there is no system in the country better than the system we built. There's nothing better. And I'm not bragging. It's just because I did 2 years of research to figure this out. So I can answer your questions. I think what you really want to have is the hybrid system, but it's the most expensive at the moment because it's on-grid, off-grid, switchable, and it has the battery bank. So what's it going to cost you? Probably, all said and done, about $20,000 if you build one the way we did, which is, we have currently the solar array, the first one, is 13 feet tall, actually a little over 13 feet tall, and 45 feet long. So it's fairly large. And there is no substitute that I know of for real estate when it comes to these cells. So, if you think that, if you're being told that, oh, geez, you can have just, 3 feet by 3 feet and you're going to be good to go, that's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Okay, so what other questions do you have?
So as a very novice getting into this, it sounds like I could go to maybe my existing power company or another one that's promoting these solar panels. And I guess my next step would be either call Snyder Electric first to find, or Xantrex to find out if there's something. And then I just have to make sure that my solar company will allow me to do that, where I set up a switch, or is that something I gotta, let?
Okay, here's what the utility wants. The utility wants engineering drawings. Literally, they're going to say, well, we need, the installer's engineering drawings of how this thing's going to work. Well, I didn't have an engineer. I just drew it myself, and I said, here's what we're going to do. Here are the engineering drawings. I didn't say that I'm not, a solar engineer. I just said, here are the engineering drawings. So I took the drawing diagrams from Snyder Electric, and I added some lines on the page that showed the disconnect switch and et cetera. What they want to do, it's getting tougher now. They want to make sure that if you live in a neighborhood, the fire department is going to want to have a disconnect. And, big red switch that says, throw this switch to disconnect the solar system, because they can disconnect your house from the grid, but they don't know what in the heck you've done with your solar system. So the firemen don't want to get electrocuted by what you've done. So they want to be able to shut that off. So that's one thing that they're very concerned with. How is the disconnect going to work? So you're going to have to figure that out. And it's not hard. What I suggest you do this. If you really want to do this system, first, look toward the south, okay? And I'm just going to say it the way it is. Remember the Hitler salute, okay? Your arm goes up to the, like a 45-degree angle, okay? Face the south and do that salute, okay? Not in favor of Adolf Hitler, but that will tell you what you're going to have to aim at with your solar panels. Okay? It's going to give you a rough idea of what you have to look at. Now, if you've got trees in the way and you're facing south, that's a problem. It's not going to work, except maybe in the winter. Okay, but you've got to have a good shot at the sun from the south. So look at that, and I'll give you the rest of the answers when we come back if you want to hold. Dan's with us.
Yes.
We're talking about solar, and I'm giving you a primer on solar panel technology and electric generation. Dan's with us. He's in Texas. And we're talking about a solar system, and we're doing a primer on how this all works. And so let me just give you some model numbers, Dan. And here's what I would do. I would go to, this is not going to be a quick fix. You're going to have to do some research. And you'll notice that I'm not saying call somebody. I am not saying call somebody who's done this. I think you can do this yourself. Depending on the array. But in terms of the electronics part, the wiring part, I think you can do all this yourself if you feel like a do-it-yourselfer, and if you're a handy guy, you can certainly do this. I mean, I did. And so I'm going to give you some, I suggest that you go to GCN or YouTube, Ron Gibson's channel, and re-listen to this particular part of the broadcast where I describe what to do, because I'm going to give you a lot of information that you need to know. So, for example, Snyder, the inverter that we have is called an XW6848. That's the model number. It's actually an XW plus 6848, which means it's 6,800 watts of continuous power delivery at 48 volts. So our battery bank is 48 volts. And let me tell you some of the, how much does that cost? About $3,600. That is the price of that particular device. Now that's not it. Then you're going to need some accessories to go with it. And one of the accessories you're going to need is called the power distribution panel. And that's where all the wires come in, and there's a bus bar, etc. in there. That's another $1,250. Then you're going to want the control panel for it. So that, let's say you put this in your garage or you put it in an outbuilding, you're going to want to monitor it from in the house. And you're going to want to program it from in the house. And that's called the control panel, the system control panel. That's $300. Then you're going to want the charge controllers to regulate the current from the solar panels to the batteries. And that part number, that's called the Snyder XW60-150. And it's an MPPT charge controller. So it's the best technology for making sure that as much current from the solar panels arrives at the battery bank as possible without loss. Okay. They're $580 each. We have 3 of those. So the more panels you have, the more charge controllers you're going to need. And that's pretty much it, except for the heavy cables and the batteries. So the battery bank that we have is comprised of 40 cells. So there are 40 individual, most people would look at them and call them a battery, but they're not a battery, they're actually a cell. And each one produces 1.2 volts. 1.2 volts. And we have 40 of them in series. So we have ones connected to the next, to the next, to the next. And you add up all 40 of those, and 40 of them at up 1.2 volts each is 48 volts. And the power cable that goes from the battery bank to the power distribution panel, where the inverter is the diameter of a quarter. And it's a couple dollars a foot. So you want to keep it real short for economic reasons, and you want to keep it real short so you don't have power loss. So that is the system without the solar panels. And the solar panels that we have are roughly 280 to 300 watts each. And each one is almost the size of a sheet of plywood. So I just want to give you, it's wider than 3 feet, and it's roughly 7 feet tall. So almost the size of a sheet of plywood each. Now, when you hook these things up, and if you have a solar array, just think about if you're trying to carry a sheet of plywood, holding it in front of you in just a 10-mile-an-hour wind. Could you do it? It might take you sailing down the road, right? So you really have to have a substantial frame. And what we did was we bought used shelving from a wholesaler. And what this guy does is he buys out Lowe's and Home Depot and the lumber shelving. So if you go into the lumber department of a Lowe's or Home Depot, you'll see these heavy racks that can support pallets and pallets of lumber. Okay, they're really, really strong. And so we bought those. We cut and welded them to an A-shaped frame, and we sunk concrete piers into the ground. We drilled 12-inch holes, and we poured 10-inch tubes of concrete, sunk them into the ground, and they are perfectly square and perfectly level. And we bolted the solar array frame to that, and then we bolted each panel to that frame. So it took a substantial amount of time, but it worked. Now, if you want to put these solar panels on your roof, you have to have the right roof angle, and you have to have the roof facing the right direction. It has to be south. So, do you want to go more on this, Dan? I can talk about this for weeks.
Well,
no,
after the commercial, I'd like to ask you something.
Absolutely. And I've got some homework for you, and that's go to YouTube, and that's go to the internet and look up, solar systems, and do lots and lots of reading before you spend a dime. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? As Lou Cassidy would say, it's Friday. Only 2 more work days till Monday. Dan in Texas is with us, and we've been talking about solar systems. And Dan, before you leave, I want to make sure that you send me an email, if you don't mind, to instructor@usaprepares.com. And I have the contacts to get everything that you want at lower prices than you'll find on eBay. I have the wholesale contacts, and I'll be glad to help you with that. So that would be the charge controller, all the Snyder Electric components. I even have the contacts for the battery bank, But the problem is that comes from China, and that's a huge risk at the moment. But for all of the parts that are available in the United States, I have the contacts, the solar panels, and the Schneider Electric components. So I can help you get that at prices that are lower than the lowest prices that you'll see anywhere, literally. And I'm not exaggerating. So I can help you do that. So your questions.
Okay. Some of them, I'll just say, are comments. So you, over the last half an hour or so, have brought up a couple things that give me different visuals now. You say baseball bat, and all I think is Lucille. So you've kind of
I was thinking of something a little, maybe a smaller baseball bat without the barbed wire.
Okay, yeah. So it's just kind of interesting how I'm a school teacher. It sounds like you used to be a school teacher. You still have it in your genes as far as how you can teach people like me. Another comment you had mentioned about going back and archiving, listening to this again, and I'm like, wait a minute. I was thinking the same thing, and I go back to when I first listened to you. You were on another broadcaster, Dr. Bill Deagle, and I still have that archive. So every tax time I go and listen, I think this will be the fourth or third time, I go back and I listen to all your things on how to save yourself money and start an own business. And I started a business. So you've been very instrumental in helping me and my family to not only survive during these different times, because it's never going to go back to normal. So, I have a side business called aquascaping where I turn my backyard into an edible garden. So instead of having grass that I can't eat, I have things that I can do thanks to you and how you help me turn maybe a hobby into a business.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm quite flattered at those kind words, and I'm so glad that you've done that. And, frankly, you used your imagination as to what kind of a business can you do and how can you make it productive and how can you have tax deductions from it and how can it be like a win-win-win-win-win. And that's what you've done. I think if we had an award, I would give it to you. So I'll just have to give you an attaboy over the air. And when we were in banking, we had the personnel department, which I guess is now called human resources. They would have this, they had this rubber stamp and it said attaboy, and it was 8.5 by 11. It would take two guys to line it up and get it printed perfectly on a piece of paper. And if somebody did something really, really spectacular, they would get an attaboy. And it was just this piece of paper. And that was in lieu of a raise, because they didn't give raises very often. But I'm glad. So what questions do you have about the solar system at this point?
Well, I think you had mentioned and just being able to go and do my own research and diligence to figure all this out, because, I'm trying to figure out how to run a future farm. And, on the Monday show, you had mentioned that having so many acres. So if you start out small and you work your way up, at least there's kind of a stepping stone. But I think you've helped me with the solar panel, and I don't know if there's any other callers, and I'm just thinking of
oh no, it's just you and me. It's just you.
Okay.
Just you and me right now. Okay. And there's something I want you to buy. And normally I would not say this. I'm looking on eBay right now. Okay. Here's one for $7.60 plus $4 shipping. It's got one bid, and here's what it's called. And I know we're going to run eBay out of them, because when I mentioned Norm Shealy's books, we run all the low-priced ones, get sold like almost immediately. So here it is. And I have one of these. Actually, I have two of these. It's called a Kill-A-Watt. KILL-A-WATT. Now, this is a little plug-in device. I've mentioned it before. And here's why I need this. You need to know what your consumption is. That's the starting point. How much electricity do you need in order to get by? So you figure, you sit down with the family and you figure, what is the minimum we can get by with? Now, if you have an electric stove, forget it. You're not going to be able to run that. If you have an electric dryer, forget it. If you have an electric hot water heater, forget it. I'm not kidding. I can't do it. I mean, with our system as big as it is, I can't run a hot water heater, electric hot water heater. It takes too much electricity. I can't run a electric dryer, and I can't run an electric stove. So if you want to have a stove, it's going to have to be propane or natural gas. If you want to have a dryer, it's going to have to be propane or natural gas. If you want to have a hot water heater, it's going to have to be wood-fired or propane or natural gas. And if you have a heating system and it's all electric, forget it. You're going to have some other kind of heating system. So that being said, your homework is to go to YouTube and look up solar systems and find out what people did wrong, and don't do that. And then go to eBay, actually go to eBay first, and buy one of these kilowatt devices. And what they are, they're a little meter with a digital display, and it will display how many volts are coming out of your receptacle. And it will show you with some buttons, you can push one of these buttons and plug in, let's say, a light, because you want to know how much electricity in terms of watts does that device use. Okay? You'll be testing everything. You'll test your microwave oven, you'll test your TV, you'll test everything. And you write down in a notebook all these devices that you want to have running. And you're going to write down how many watts that it will consume. And then you'll say, we can't do it. We can't run the toaster and the microwave oven and the bread machine and the computer and the TV and, et cetera, at the same time. Okay, so now what do we do? Well, you have to schedule. And you'll have to schedule because you're dealing with a limited resource. You have what's called constrained optimization. You have a situation where you're trying to figure out how you can make do with what you have because you're going to be limited, and you're going to be limited to sunny days. So when the sun shines, you'll have electricity. When it's dark at night, you've got none except what's in your battery bank. So you'll have to calculate, and there are formulas, and you'll learn how to do this from the internet. It's kind of difficult on the radio, but you'll learn how to do this, and you'll determine what size battery bank you need. Now, for us, I'll tell you what we have. This is a good starting point. Each one of our cells, these 1.2 volt cells, is 500 ampere hours, so 500 AH. That's kind of a large cell. Now, you can get the 100s, and that's too small, okay, because you'll find out that you can just run very few things overnight. So really, here's the whole secret. It's easy to generate electricity. It's expensive to store it. It's expensive to store it. So the electricity on the grid, none of it, not 1 watt of it is being stored. The grid produces electricity, and it's consumed as it is produced. Right then and there, that nanosecond, it's consumed. So there is no storage on the grid. So when the turbines go down, the reactor goes down, the dam shuts down, whatever it is, it stops. Right then and there. There is no storage. So your system is more sophisticated, at least from your perspective, than the grid is, because you'll be able to store electricity. But to store it, you're going to have maintenance. Now, let me just give you a thumbnail sketch of what that is. So we have these flooded cells. That means they have electrolyte. And the water, the distilled water, evaporates from them during charging and discharging. So how much water do we use? Distilled water? We use about 10 gallons of distilled water every couple of months. That's an enormous quantity of distilled water. So where do you get that in the current environment? I mean, you can't get all kinds of things. Distilled water may, go short supply. You'll have to distill your own. And that's another thing to think about. So I bought 3 distillers, and it's just a box of parts, and I have to make one out of it. So that's my solution. But you need to get this kilowatt. This it's called a P3, letter P as in Peter, the number 3, and I see them for $16, $12.50, $15.50. So I wouldn't spend more than like $15 on it, but that's what you'll need, and you'll be grinning from ear to ear and frowning at the same time when you find out how much electricity some devices use and others don't use. So you need that. Make that chart. Figure out what devices you have to have running and how long they run. And then you'll be able to size the system that you need. Okay? Now, I would oversize the inverter at first. That's what I would do. I'd make the inverter bigger. So we have a 6,800 watt inverter. That's considered pretty big, but it's only like maybe 25% more expensive than a smaller one. And it's way better to oversize that and say, shoot, I bought the wrong one. Now I have to get rid of that one and buy a bigger one. Okay? Because generally speaking, you can't just incrementally make them larger. With the Snyder, you can. You can add more inverters and you can chain them together. So if we wanted to double it, we could buy 2 of them. So that was one of the reasons that went into the Snyder. But most of them, that's not the case. What questions do you have, Dan?
Well, I mean, I think with solar panels, I think that was very helpful in all that. Now it's up to me, just like, I look at the years ago where I listened to you and I'm like, well, I could just take this in one ear and out the other, as my dad used to say. So I think those listeners out there, there's a lot of things that they've been listening to over the years. Have they actually gone through and gone to that next step? And, like I said, trying to do my side business, I'm thinking of gray water and how I can turn my shower water into using it in my backyard. Do you do gray water, to change subjects?
No, we could. We could. The plumbing system, we plumbed our own house, so I could very easily make that happen. But no, we don't at this point. We don't.
Okay.
But then again, we have our own well. We have, right for now, we have plenty of water. But, necessity is the mother of invention. So I have on hand the plumbing parts, all the elbows, Ys, Ts, etc. Everything I need to do it. And that's kind of the way I live, to make sure that we are prepared to have everything we need for the unforeseen and for the expected. It's just a lifestyle. So, if you look in our plumbing department, we have a plumbing department, we have an electrical department, we have an automotive department, we have a filter department. I mean, literally. Dan, did you want to hold or?
Nope. Hey, thank you for your time and keep up the good work.
Well, that was delightful, Dan calling in from Texas and chatting about solar systems. There are a lot of questions that people have that maybe we can help with. And if you're interested in preparedness, you can certainly give us a call. You can call today, 866-582-9933. I'll do my best to help. I have this list of 200 items, and we got through 2 of them. And so here's another one, candles. So one of the things that happens when the grid goes down, people, first thing they do is they look for some form of light. Typically what happens is they find the flashlights and the batteries are dead. But then they go for the candles and they look for something to light them with and shoot, what do you light them with? And that gets us back to the matches. So what you do is you keep the matches in one place, okay? A place that you can get to, if you feel around in the dark, you'll be able to get to them. So make sure that, everybody knows where they are and keep them in that glass jar and have the candles in a place where you can get to them. And a lot of people keep the candles on the kitchen table, and sometimes these candles are large bases and they're heavy and, they're like the size of a cooking pot, or a little smaller and they don't fall over. But one of the problems with candles and candlesticks and candlestick holders is that these tall, thin candles, roughly the diameter of a quarter, are a real fire hazard. And we have dogs here, and dogs aren't used to fires. At least most dogs aren't. And it's possible that if they bump into a table or and the candle falls over and there's placemats that are flammable, you can set your house on fire. So, if you look at what most people in the preparedness aisle will tell you, have lots of candles, well, that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, that's one way to go, but I don't think it's a safe way to go. So I'd say forget it, because they smell, they produce very little light, but they're better than kerosene lamps in the respect that they don't smell as much. Kerosene lamps, the antique type, work pretty well, but of course they smell when they're filled. They smell when you use them, and they're sooty. And you've got to clean the chimneys, and the chimneys are easily broken. And if a pet knocks it off the table, now you've got a big problem because you've got the wick that's burning. You've got the kerosene on the table and leaking off the side of the table. Because just like the flat earth theory teaches you that water runs off the side of the table, right? So I don't think a kerosene lamp is a good way to go. Now we have them here at the farm. Why? Well, because it was the only way to go back in the 1800s. You know, if you wanted to have light, you had a kerosene lamp. Just think, you know, what happened in the 1860s. That was a lighting, fixture, a kerosene lamp. So I don't like that. Now, do we have kerosene? Yes. Do we have stored kerosene? Yes. Do we have it in 5-gallon metal containers? Yes. Does it volatilize? Yes. Do we have less kerosene now than we had 15 years ago, even though we didn't use it? Yes. Why? Because it volatilized, even though it's in a sealed metal can. So I don't like kerosene. Some people use it to thin diesel in the winter, but it doesn't have lubrication effects. So it's probably good for cleaning parts, you know, good for cleaning automotive parts, but not much more than that. So what do? Well, that's easy. 12-volt lighting strips. You can get them on eBay, and of course they come from China. Now, I don't like shopping with the Chinese, but it's already here in the country. So if you get these rolls of roughly 5 meters, which is about 15 feet, 16 feet, of LED strips, you can power them with a 12-volt car battery. And what we've done here at our house, we have them, and they've been running for years. What we did was really simple. I made some what's called picture rail. Now, you've heard of chair rail. Chair rail is about the height of the back of a chair. And the idea is if you push the chair into the wall, it prevents the wall from being scuffed up with the chair that bangs into it. Well, above that, about 1 foot from the ceiling, if you put something similar, but with a flat top on it, like chair rail, but smaller, that would be called picture rail. And if you attach these lighting strips to the picture rail, you have indirect lighting. I'll tell you more about it when we come back. So, class, if you like this kind of broadcast where it's just me solo talking about the book and that's not for sale, not published, unavailable, tips from my book, let me know. Instructor at USA Prepares. If you don't like it, you can let me know too. And because what we are is a bunch of teachers, and we're trying to teach you things that we think you might want to know, and we'd like to hit the nail on the head if we can. So if there's topics that you would like to hear about, just send me an email, instructor@usaprepares.com. I'm really busy, so please keep it really short and sweet, and that way I'll be able to pay attention to it. Okay, so going down the list, the 12-volt LED strips, I've talked about this for years. It's really simple. So the first thing that happens when the grid goes down is you look for lighting. Well, wouldn't it be nice if you just had a wall switch? Literally a switch, just like all your other wall switches. And you flip it, and on come the lights. No kerosene, no matches, no flashlight, none of that. And you do that in the kitchen. It's a really easy thing to do. So you make some chair rail, or you buy picture rail. And you can literally take something as simple as a 1x2 piece of furring strip, and you can cut it in half. Roughly get a 1x1. And you nail that to the wall, 12 inches down from the ceiling, roughly. You figure where you want to put it and where you think it'd look the best. And you attach to that the LED lighting strip, which is about 3/8 of an inch wide. And it points upward. And you connect that with you can use speaker wire if you want. Something like speaker wire or alarm cable. And you can connect that to a wall switch. And I used the AC wall switches, the kind that, 10 for $3.50 roughly, that match the decor of your house. And they say you can't use them, but I find it kind of interesting. It works fine for me. They say you shouldn't use an AC wall switch with DC. Well, there's so little current going through it, it just works fine. And so I put a box in the wall. I ran it to a battery, and I charged the battery. So how long will you get? Oh, I don't know, maybe roughly a month of light usage from a Group 27 or a Group 31 fully charged car battery. Literally. It works great. So I have a car battery stored, and I keep it charged, and I just flip on the light switch, and it works great. And how long does it work? Well, I hooked ours up to a 12-volt power supply, and I hooked the 12-volt power supply up to the solar system, and so I can do it that way as well. And I've had these lights running for years. How many years? Oh, I don't know, maybe 7. And they still work great. So you can do that. You can buy these LED lighting strips on eBay. Let's say $10 for 15 feet shipped. You can get some furring strip for a couple dollars. If you have a table saw, rip it down into something that you like. You can paint it. You can sand it, of course, and make it look nice. And they use a level about a foot down from the ceiling. And I think you'll be impressed. So, will it be as bright as the lighting that you already have? No. But will you bump into things? No. You'll find that you'll get accustomed to it, and you'll actually like it in addition to whatever lighting you already have. So you can experiment. You can use black electrical tape on this LED lighting strip to that length that you're going to nail onto the wall, and move it around the room and figure out where the best place for it is. Now, believe it or not, I have some just sitting on top of the wall cabinets. It's not permanently attached, just sitting there. And it's pointing up. So when I turn on this wall switch, I have light that's pointed up at the ceiling around or above the kitchen cabinets. Now, where are the kitchen cabinets? Well, that's where we work. And I also have a kitchen, there's a computer in the kitchen, and there's a 5-foot long counter space that, we designed into our kitchen cabinetry. So it was an area that my dad and I could sit down next to each other, 5 feet wide, and we could look at the computer together. And I took some of this LED lighting and I aim it from the bottom of the cabinet down onto the work area, where the keyboard and mouse is and where we'd have paper and pencils and that kind of thing. So we can have even more illumination. And you can experiment with forward and backward, put it in the right location so you don't have shadows. And it uses very, very little current. It doesn't generate any heat. It's a great way to go. Now, I would suggest that you consider putting a fuse in line at the battery location with this LED lighting system. Just as a protection against, short circuit. If it happens, the fuse will blow. So it's a great way to go. It lasts a really long time, and I can't see any reason not to do it. So literally, if we had a power failure, but, we don't have to worry about that because we have an off-grid type system. But if we had a power failure, we all can find our way to this wall switch, flip the switch, and we've got lights. And it'll last a long time. Now, if you don't have that, there's a quick alternative if you have an uninterruptible power system. You should consider taking a lamp, a desk lamp kind of a thing, table lamp, putting an LED low wattage bulb in there. Let's say a 9-watt Edison type base bulb, LED, because that uses very little current. That'd be a 60-watt incandescent equivalent. Plug that into your uninterruptible power system, and you'll have a whole night's worth of electricity, actually maybe even a couple days, if you use it judiciously, from that uninterruptible power system. Now, of course, the more devices you have running on your UPS, uninterruptible power system, the faster the battery is going to go dead. But if you have a battery in good condition, as we did when we lived in the corrupt Commonwealth of Virginia, we found that we could run all night on a fluorescent 15-watt tube all night easily with a 450-watt American Power Conversion UPS. Just a thought. So that's another way of going. So if you have a computer and if you decide that you're going to use your UPS for lighting in one of these situations where the grid is down, unplug the computer from the UPS, because the computer always has current drawn by it. Okay, even though they're off, they're still on a little bit. So unplug that from the UPS and just use that compact LED type light, and it'll work great. All right, how about this? One other thing. I used 16 gauge wire for the LED lighting strip, and you can buy that with a white sheath. So it'll be a black wire and a red wire, reds plus, blacks minus, with a white covering on it. You can buy it as alarm cable, 500-foot rolls. You can find it on eBay. So make sure you have enough. Okay. Now, the shorter the run, the better. The shorter the better. Why? Because you'll have some losses in the wiring. All right. I'm sure many of you have digital thermometers. They're quick, they're easy. But do you have a spare battery for it? You can buy the batteries for it on eBay. This is not a commercial for eBay, but I'm just giving you the best, lowest cost source. So if I say Amazon, it's because I found Amazon to be the best. If I say eBay, it's because I found eBay to be the best. Best meaning the combination of shipping, having it actually arrive, having it be quality, being actually what you thought you were buying, actually getting what you thought you were buying at the lowest price. So those rolls of wire, 16 gauge wire, 500 feet, are available on eBay at the best price, or at least right now. Digital thermometers, okay, so they typically use a small button type battery, LR41, and you can get replacements. So I have. And how much are they? Well, you can get 10 of them for $4. 10 for $4 shipped. Now, I like that. I like it because, number one, I'm not paying tax on it. And number two, I'm not paying retail on it. And number three, I don't have to go out. And they're 40 cents a piece. So I suggest you consider that. But make sure you open up your thermometer, and usually they have a cap that you can pop off the top and look at the cell that's in there, and it's typically going to be an LR41. Now, what about, in that line of thinking, what about spare disk type cells? Also, you can probably call them a battery for your car's electronic key fob. Okay, well, how often does it happen where you try to start your car or try to unlock your car and it won't? Now, we've seen a number of people who have called the dealer. They say, I've got a problem. The dealer say, well, we'll have to tow the car in. Really? Well, if your key doesn't work, one thing to check first is the battery in your key fob. Now, a dealer will, replace that for you. It might be $35, because they've got to have their expensive technician think about this for 10 minutes. Well, you can buy spare disk type cells for your electronic key fob, and they're typically 1 or 2 part numbers. And I'll tell you what they are. They are numbers CR. I don't know why we call them numbers when they're letters and numbers, but the automotive industry calls these part numbers. Okay. So a part number for these type of cells are typically a CR2025, or CR2031, CR2031. And the difference is the milliampere rating of the batteries. One is a little bit thicker than the other. So you want to make sure that you get the right one, because if you look at just one and you try to remember, and you could get it confused easily because they are so close in appearance. So the CR2025 or the CR2031, how much are they on eBay? $10, 10 of them for $4. 10 of them for $4 shipped. So your car probably won't work without 1 or 2 of these. And our vehicles, we have a 1996 Mercedes diesel E300. It uses 2 of them. We have all of our old Mercedes cars use these. Or almost all of them use these. And it takes 2 of them. So, and they'll last for years. Just keep them cool and dry. Heat is the enemy of these things. I don't mean keep them in the refrigerator. I just mean keep them cool and dry. So you can put them in a Ziploc bag and put them where they're going to stay at a relative temperature throughout the day rather than get hot and cold, because that will accelerate the failure of these batteries. It'll reduce the shelf life. And while you're at it, if you have one of those cordless phones, you're going to find out that your talk time goes lower and lower, and it gets reduced because the batteries do not last forever. So how do you find the battery for your cordless landline type phone? Well, there's a little compartment for the battery in the handheld unit, and you pop that open, and you will see the battery part number on the battery. And you go to eBay and you type in that battery part number, and you'll be able to get them for very low cost. How much? Oh, let's say a couple dollars a piece. Okay, we're going down the list of items in the book that I think you should consider having. And this is from my unfinished, unpublished, not for sale book that I've been writing, and it's not organized. This book is not organized yet. It's just random thoughts that I have, and as I think of them, I write them down and then put them in a notebook and talk about them every once in a while. Next thing on the list is engine oil. So I suggest that you have at least 6 quarts or two 5-quart jugs. That's a good start. If you want them for your generator or lawnmower, air-cooled lawnmower, riding lawnmower, or your gas or propane generator, I suggest you get 15W40, name brand, diesel engine oil. And 6 quarts or 2 5-quart jugs would be a good start. And that diesel engine oil works really, really well because it has the right additives for an air-cooled engine. If you buy the oil that is recommended by the manufacturer, and they say, well, use SN oil, SAE 30, SN, spark ignition type, classification N, it does not have the additives for lubricity that you need. It doesn't have the zinc and the phosphorus that you need for the camshaft wear prevention that you need for those types of engines. So we here at the farm use diesel engine oil. So you're probably thinking, well, it's not a diesel engine. Yeah, I know, but diesel engines are way rougher on the oil than gasoline engines. They bang more, they vibrate more, they have more stresses, so they require better lubrication. So you're using an oil that is designed for much more stressful requirements than gasoline engine oil. So that's why we recommend 15W40. Now, can you put it in your gasoline engine? Yeah, I think you can. And why do I say I think you can? Because I've never found a reason why it won't work. Never. Not under normal circumstances. If you live in Alaska, maybe it's a little too thick. The viscosity may be too thick. But for the rest of us, I think it'll be just fine. But do your own research. Don't blame me if it doesn't work. I do it. I put 15W40 when I want to. Diesel engine oil has more detergent than gasoline engine oil. And it will clean the inside of the engine better. It really will. So if I buy a used car and I think it needs to be cleaned out gently, I'll put diesel engine oil in it. 15W40, diesel engine oil, and I'll change the oil filter twice as often as recommended when I'm cleaning an engine. Okay? And I use good oil filters. And so think about that. Do your own research. Next item, gasoline cans. Now, they have gone way up in price because a company called Bilt, B-I-L-T-Z, which manufactured them and sold them through Walmart and other locations, other stores, they went belly up. Why? Because stupid people sued them and sued them and sued them because they got burned lighting themselves on fire because they didn't have any idea that you weren't supposed to pour gasoline on a hot engine. So because they burned themselves, the lawyers got in a feeding frenzy and ultimately killed the company. So he took a $3.79 gas can made out of plastic, really top of the line, great quality, great engineering, great everything, and drove it up to like $30 until they went out of business. So I suggest that if you find them, maybe at a garage sale, you can find gasoline storage containers, diesel fuel storage containers. I suggest you consider having them because your generator is going to use between a half a gallon and a gallon of gasoline per hour. And these cans, these containers are coded, they're color coded. So red is for gasoline. Yellow is for diesel fuel. Blue is for drinking water. So I suggest that you do not mix them up. Don't put gasoline in a blue can and then use it for water later because gasoline's toxic. Okay? And don't mix the yellow and the red with diesel and gasoline because if you put diesel fuel in your mower, you're going to have to figure out how to drain out the fuel tank and the carburetor because your gasoline-powered device will not work on diesel fuel. And worse than that is if you put gasoline in a diesel engine because it will likely destroy the engine. Okay? So that's why they're color-coded, so you don't make a mistake. So red is gasoline, yellow is for diesel fuel, and blue is for drinking water. Last quick thing, Gerber paraframe knives. Gerber, P-A-R-A-F-R-A-M-E, 3-inch. You can buy them on eBay. They've gone way up in price. They used to be $6 a piece. Now they're way more than that. So you do a search on Gerber paraframe and then comma the word lot, L-O-T, and buy several of them to drive the shipping costs down. And they are going fast. You can get them used, but get the serrated edge one, the serrated edge. Thanks for being with us, class. Above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.